What would you say are some of the hidden forces that people don't pay attention to that actually lead down a path in life of feeling lost, empty, and left out?
Uh, well, I have a lot of experience with this. I felt this way. I felt like I was missing out on my life for most of my life, and things took a dramatic turn for me. I think that for any of us to be happy, we not only need to like not be depressed and not in a terrible relationship and not in an awful job, or we have enough to live on. We need some of those basics, but to be really happy, you have to find what you're really what is your gift? What are you here to do? And it might be it might be how you make a living, it might not, but if you're not using that thing, that like unique way that you contribute to the world, it's never satisfying. And so that's I think the end game, the what we're really looking for in healing from trauma is to be able to have space to become our full and real selves, including what we have to bring to the world.
And what do you think are some of the signs that someone's childhood was full of unresolved trauma?
Unresolved trauma. I've always been, I just chuckle at the word resolved because there's this idea out there that if you just talk about it, it's resolved. And that was never true for me. But, um, but I have gained some respect for the word processing. Trauma that's still activating your nervous system means it's not processed yet. So every time you think of it, or you're reminded of it, or you're flashing back on it, you get adrenaline and you start dysregulating. And that kind of means it hasn't been processed yet. So some signs that the signs that trauma has happened in the past. And honestly, I don't think a lot of people don't realize that trauma happened in the past. What they're more likely to not see the connection with is that problems they're having today are from that. Like we'll walk around going, "Oh, it's just me," I'm just this screw up, and yeah, and I had a bad childhood. And but some of the common signs are a lot of difficulty focusing mentally, um, a lot of difficulty maintaining a steady level of energy. And I know there's a lot of reasons why these things can happen, but trauma is a big one, that disrupts nervous system functioning, and especially if it happened when you were a child and you were developing. The ability to feel connected to other people, like you have a good friend, but when they're in the hospital, you don't know what to say. There's just kind of this, there can be this like failure to connect how you act or how you respond to somebody and to feel connected. We are connected, but we don't feel it. And that can actually have a neurological origin as well, or it can be just because you went through so much. For some people, it's because of autism. I talked to a therapist the other day who had a theory that autism was sometimes a misdiagnosis for people who had just really their ability to connect had been damaged. And I was like, just a theory. Some signs are emotional dysregulation, where stuff like anger or anxiety or grief come out outsized. And the sign, like we're all told, like all your feelings are good, you have to feel them. Not so for people who get emotionally dysregulated. Sometimes it's the trauma talking. And like if I were at work and I were trying to talk to my boss about something that had offended me and I ended up crying and yelling, that would not be appropriate. It wouldn't be a good place and time for those emotions. But that is what happens to a lot of us, is our emotions come out too strong. We're attracted to people who are trouble. They're unavailable, they're inappropriate, they might be abusive, they're embarrassing. You have to hide that you're with them from friends. That's very common for people who grew up with trauma. Feeling discombobulated or spaced out, like you forget where you were driving, or you forget what you were saying, or why you came into the room. And we all joke about it. We're like, oh, senior moment, haha. But that's like a little dissociation that can happen. And so those are some of the main things. But the one that I think that a lot of people are feeling right now that's not talked about enough is how disconnected people feel. That they feel weird in groups, they never feel like they belong, and they. I'll tell you a story about like groups. So I am a big joiner, but I'm not a big stayer. I'm getting better at it. But I used to sign up to be in clubs and committees and stuff like that. But I would never last very long. And I don't. I'd sort of have big ideas like I want to contribute to this. I know what to do. I have a lot of knowledge about this. I'd really like to be part of this. But before long, I at the center of the group like that, I'd start to feel really uncomfortable, and I'd gradually drift out. Maybe stay at about 80% from the center of the circle. Socially, or just get out of there, just not be part of it, sort of rationalize in my head, I don't like these people, I don't fit in, I don't do this. But that becomes like everything. So I deal a lot with what I call covert avoidance. And it's something that anybody could do, but I think it's one of the major signs of trauma is where we're pretty functional, we work, we have friends, maybe a spouse, we belong to things, but we're never really there. We're going through the motions. We're saying we're coming to the party, but we don't come. Or we come to the party, but we never really listen. We just eat something, drink something, leave. We come home, look at our phones, flop out on the couch, don't really talk to anybody. That's what I call covert avoidance. And so that can be a sign of trauma that comes from it's just so triggering to deal with people. And we're dysregulated, and most people don't realize they're dysregulated. I mean, it's sort of like people are starting to be aware of that word, but we're managing it by avoiding people. And it ends up being very, very lonely and isolated.
And I think a lot of times people want to understand like what happened in their childhood or in their life that could cause things like this. I think when people hear the word trauma, I think it's the conversation's changed a bit over the last few years, but traditionally people are like, "Oh, something severe happened to me." Um, like, what is your understanding on some of the subtle things that happen in childhood that lead to things like emotional disconnection in adult relationships, being attracted to emotionally unavailable people, like not feeling like you belong, etc.?
Well, I think those like I'll call them injuries. It's an injury to your natural human ability. They could happen to anybody. They could be part of somebody's introversion, like a natural part of their personality. But I think that trauma, it's not subtle. And yeah, people used to consider trauma was something extreme. Nowadays, I think people say this to me a lot. They're like, but aren't we all traumatized? I'm like, no, not in the sense I'm talking about, not where your nervous system operation gets disrupted and your natural immune system and endocrine system aren't functioning properly. People who live through a lot of trauma as kids there's a very high correlation with chronic disease, with learning disabilities, dementia, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, reproductive disorders. Like, this is not subtle. It's not subtle. It's an injury in effect to your nervous system functioning. And your nervous system is this beautiful organism that governs almost every part of your being. And it's hard to name something that's not part of it. I always say, well, I don't know, maybe your soul exists outside your nervous system, but it affects your thoughts, your feelings, your digestion, your attraction to people. Just so much of your life relies on a nervous system that's functioning well and perceptive. And I do think that our individual nervous systems have a way of communicating with each other that we're not always conscious of. It's not verbal, but you can sort of feel when somebody doesn't like you, or you can feel when they're deceiving you. If your nervous system is functioning properly, you can be perceptive like that. So a lot of how we get into trouble is that got sort of damaged and shut down, or temporarily at least, is that level of nervous system perception. Like, this feels like a dangerous street, or this person is being insincere, or there's something fishy here. It can't be true. That's life. Your happy life depends on having very, very good perception about that. So for your nervous system to be thrown off, it can happen through, if you're living in a family that has abuse, neglect, they're kind of two different animals. Abuse, where they're hurting you, where parents are fundamentally not supposed to do that, or they're lying to you, like, stop it, there's nothing wrong, don't tell anybody that I just hit you. If you tell anybody, I'll hit you again. You're participating in stuff that's not true. So a lot of our nervous system is developing, should be developing, because we're getting honest feedback, like, oh, when I tell a lie, it feels terrible. When I tell a lie, people don't trust me, and truth is important. So this is how traumatized people can end up, like, so injured morally, spiritually, emotionally. And I don't think that gets dealt with. That's a lot of what I had to figure out for myself. But there are subtle things, but I think by and large we're equipped to deal with subtle traumas. It can just get to be more than a person can cope with, and everybody's different. But I think that's technically the definition of trauma, is hard stuff beyond the level that you can cope with, given who you are. And so, we've all been bullied a little bit, but bullying could get to the point where it really, like, wrecks your life and you're never the same. Where is that line? It's different for different people. I try not to focus too much on what happened. I don't think it's critical to know exactly what happened. I think most people do know what happened. Maybe more what we need sometimes is a little validation, like, "Hey, that's not normal. That's bad. That's understandable why you struggle in that area of your life." We need a little validation on what it is. So that's one good thing that can happen. But we've been in a culture that believes that just focusing on what happened and talking about it a lot was going to fix it. And the revolution of the last 10-15 years is discovering that, you know what, talking about it is not the end all be all of how we get past what happened. That there's, first of all, there's just like a physiological change that happens, and a lot of the symptoms and sort of, odd behaviors that we have and ways of thinking, they're neurologically driven. And sometimes if you come at it first as a nervous system thing and deal with first order therapies like exercise, go outside and move your body, start using writing to get the thoughts out, maybe not necessarily have to talk about it. For some of us, that's very triggering of dysregulation. So there can be another way to come at it that strengthens you to be able to then find your unique things that are going to really help you change your life. But the other thing that I don't think we deal with enough is, yeah, a lot happened, but most of what's disrupting my life today is going to be stuff that I'm doing, ways that I'm re-traumatizing myself with self-defeating behavior, staying in the bad relationship, or taking a job I hate and then getting very afraid that I can't leave, that it's just too difficult to change jobs. That's a trauma-driven behavior. Or just being, angry and cantankerous all the time, or obsessed with somebody who's not interested. So there's all these ways that we do this, and I'm sure they have their origin and stuff that happened to us. But I think the most useful thing we can do sometimes is learn to just like self-regulate and then start working on the life problems. And what happened in the past does tend to become clearer, and the validation comes. But that's, for me, that was the path for healing. You know, in this book, I tell the story. This is Re-regulated, my book. But I was in therapy 3 times a week when I was sort of hitting bottom with my trauma symptoms, and I was continually being asked to talk about what happened and then given Xanax to cope with how I was just freaking out. And that was a very like bad combination.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of people right now are feeling lost, and they're feeling like empty, and they're just disconnected, like you've said. And, it's because of a lot of this stuff that we just haven't figured out how to deal with in real time, and it's eating away at our quality of life. Like, what are some ways that you yourself or people that you've seen have success and the people that you talk to, like, how do you get better at reconnecting to yourself when you're so disconnected from who you are?
Well, some parents have done a real number on their kids by not seeing and recognizing who they are, being too busy or projecting on them who they're supposed to be. So I think there that's one of the traumatic reasons why we got like this. But I think we've all been going through a social trauma through the pandemic, through the social division, where if you do try to tune into current events, you're going to be exposed to a lot of like hatred and people trying to gin up your emotions and your activate anger because anger makes you click. And the this addiction to dopamine plus, I don't know, it's kind of like a dark addiction, isn't it, to be like, I want to get mad today, this. But mad, like, why do we love to be mad? Because it's better than feeling sad. And a lot of us are dealing with depression, and whether we realize it or not, like, it's just like, at least anger has some energy in it. It gives you a sense of purpose and focus. But like everybody who sort of indulges in that, sometimes it does come up empty. It's utterly empty. It's not even your anger. You've sort of been like fed this whole stream of media and stuff to get you to watch a bunch of violence and then be very angry and think that you're a victim. And meanwhile, like, are we actually paying attention to the most important problems in our personal lives or in our community or in our culture? No. And that's one of the things that's also very sad when you just think, like, I live in Oakland, California, and we have tent cities under every freeway, and everybody's up in arms about all this stuff, and I'm like, but you know, I can think of one thing like we should be solving like right now, and the people are living in tents and dying of drug overdoses, and it's quite dire, and It's making life untenable for people who live anywhere near that stuff. And we can't really face it. We're like totally distracted in this dream of what's important. So that's for me, a lot of my healing has been, it's just been like tactical about re-regulating, but also I've studied a lot of philosophy and religion and started to understand how toxic it is to indulge in those feelings. If you study Stoics or Christianity or basically anything major and traditional, the toxicity of using anger as your fuel is very clear to every generation, and it's been behind, war and bad things that have happened, and people able to turn their back on others in need. So there's how can there be meaning in life when you're not able to stay present to the problems of today? And also, I don't think that we were, I heard this a long time ago, and I think it's true. We're not really neurologically or emotionally equipped to care deeply and do something about all the problems of the world. But that's what the internet presents to us, all of the problems. And so it's very easy to get wrapped up in stuff over which you have no control and you may not even have full information, and then forget to pick up your kids at school, and make dinner for them, or to take care of to sit down and take care of yourself. Like I do this thing I call the daily practice every day. But if I don't watch out, I'll skip my daily practice so that I can obsess on Twitter or something about that. And it's not healthy for me. It's a misappropriation of my attention and healing power, and it leaves me feeling awful.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we definitely live in a world where it makes it super easy to get disconnected, right, with everything going on. But, I think that the only hope for people is to take responsibility and control what they can. You mentioned fitness, you mentioned journaling. Like as far as like getting connected to somebody, to oneself, to like figure out like who they are, what they value, develop some self-awareness. Is there any like daily or weekly practices that you've implemented to help you get back to a place where you're feeling whole again?
Yeah. I call it my daily practice. It's something I teach. I stumbled on it 30 years ago when I was attacked on the street. I kind of hit bottom. I was beaten unconscious by random people. They broke my jaw and my teeth. And that same week, my mom died. And that same year, I got my heart broken. By the person I had loved the most. And it was too much trauma. I couldn't really like handle it all. It was too much. And after that assault, that's when I was going to therapy 3 times a week. That's when I was prescribed Xanax. I was never prescribed with PTSD. And I became completely disconnected from people. I wanted desperately to feel connected, but I couldn't. I thought I didn't know how to do it. I couldn't find myself for the life of me. And people would be like, "How do you feel?" Or "You have to love yourself." I'd be like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." I'm just like, I'm freaking out all the time. I was just like inside. It was too much. I think a lot of people are in overwhelm like that right now, even if they don't know it. I think there has to be a quiet time. So somebody showed me it just I lucked out at that time. I was overwhelmed. I didn't think I was going to survive, really. I didn't think I could go on. I was very depressed. I felt unhelpable. They were just looking at me like I was crazy, the way I just couldn't stop freaking out. I'd leave the therapy office crying, shaking, like, she's really like, I was afraid they were going to hospitalize me. But I now know I had very normal symptoms of trauma. That's all. Very normal symptoms of like underlying childhood trauma kicked off by an adult trauma. So this woman showed me how to do this very simple, right? It's simple, but it's a very specific writing technique. If anybody wants to learn it, I teach it for free. I'll give you a link that you can share with anybody. They can sign up and take this free course. Um, and I call it the daily practice. But it's a way of getting your distressed thoughts and emotions, to name them, get them out, put them on paper, and then ask for them to be removed if you're inclined to, as a higher power person, or if not, to release them, which is very hard. I'm not good at that, but some people do. And you release them for a while, and there's no order of magnitude. They might be legitimate fears or just anxieties. It's okay. Doesn't matter. You're not there to rank them, but you name them, you ask for them to be removed, and now I know scientifically why this has worked so well, you then meditate. So I'm somebody who meditates twice a day, and I was advised to do that by the person who taught me the writing technique 30 years ago. And the meditation, I now know that scientifically, when you're facing distress like that, honestly, it can be exhausting. It can feel like too much. even though consciously you're not thinking it, you'll end up quitting after a while. You can't really sustain something where you're just facing a lot of trouble, but you're not getting this peace afterwards. So we face it, release it, and then rest in meditation twice a day. Now, a lot of people, they hear this and they're like, that's too hard. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, what's hard is not having a solution to the bag of cats that's going on in your head, constantly worried and pissed off. And, you know, I'm not going to make it. And how am I going to make the bills? And I'm probably going to get fired and nobody loves me. And I'm too fat and I'm alone forever, and all this, it's just like a lot of noise in there. And the noise is generated by the trauma. Early trauma can actually leave you with a neurological obstruction to being able to process your thoughts and feelings. They're not processed. They're just all bouncing around like they're all like stuff that happened 2 weeks ago is happening now. You're still getting adrenaline over it. You're not able to like just let it be a memory and be here now. So the like very philosophical forms of meditation were more than I could focus on. My focus was I couldn't even read a paragraph when I had acute PTSD, but I could write what was so horrible, that I have fear, I'm not going to make it. Fear, I'm sicker than everybody else. And then resentment. I'm resentful at my doctor because I have fear he never remembers what happened to me, and fear he makes me talk about it again and again, and fear it's not in my record, and fear he doesn't believe me, and fear he thinks I'm just trying to get drugs. Those were some of my resentments at the time that I had that assault and I first learned this technique. I was mad, but being mad all the time was making it impossible for me to heal, to really let my brain and nervous system recompose in the way that it's natural. We all dysregulate sometimes, but we also, most of us can eventually re-regulate, but trauma can make it very hard to do that. It can leave you stuck in a dysregulated state for a long time, and that's when the mistakes happen. You're lashing out, you're forgetting things, you're getting lost. Feeling empty is a big part of dysregulation too, because your nervous system helps literally, like proprioception, like where are my arms right now? What time of day is it? Is it summer? Where am I? Your perception of like actual like space and time and where are you and how are you feeling, but also your perception of reality. What's the mood here? Am I going too fast in the car? Like all of this starts to fall away. So of course you feel anxious. Your inputs are messed up. So it's funny when you start to face just like one category of distress in your mind, you start to gain all these other things. Like my physical balance improved, my asthma went away, my back stopped hurting. I noticed I was tired when I was tired. I noticed I was hungry when I was hungry. I noticed I was full when I was full. All of that stuff was pretty, up in the air for me. So dysregulation, it has this like widespread effect on you. And if you can start to just take it on in the most simple way, it starts to change other things. And, when you're like not yelling at people so much, your life gets better in a lot of other ways that make it easier to stay regulated.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the part about emotional regulation. Like, I think that if you don't learn how to regulate your emotions, like your life will be chaotic, right? And you brought up the point in like more of like practices to help you be ready for emotional regulation times that will come up in your life. But just for the sake of this conversation, let's just say I said something to you that really bothered you, other than obviously leaving this conversation. Like, what types of things would you do like in real time to bring yourself back down to like a level of like presence so that you wouldn't like ruminate and let your emotions run wild?
Everything depends on recognizing that it's happening. So the first order of business is to start to get in touch with what does emotional dysregulation look like. It often feels like chemicals are running down your arms. It feels very urgent. It's like I have to persuade this person right now that I'm right and they're wrong, or else the world's going to end. It feels very dire. And when you start to teach yourself through practice, through reading, through study. I have a whole course on it, Dysregulation Boot Camp. And then here in the book, there's a whole deep section on emotional dysregulation. First, you have to know that it's happening, and your mind is playing tricks on you. It's like, but they're doing it to me. Of course, I have to feel this way because of what they're doing to me, and your perspective is lost. And so sometimes, and so there, one of the core questions of a person who has dysregulation is it just me, or is this person really abusive? Like we literally walk through life a little unsure. Am I being abused or am I being a bitch? You just don't know, you don't know. And so And so you start to know. That's what starts to happen with healing, is you become aware. And so my daily practice is a way that I keep getting in touch with myself. The patterns become obvious. I start to, and also to have, when you have somebody who helps you along the way, a person or a group, where you can get some perspective and people go, Anna, I think you're maybe taking this too hard. Or Anna, I think you're in denial about how dangerous this person is. Or, people who give you a little reality check, and you can never really believe one person's take on it. But I teach a set of emergency measures you can do to get re-regulated, and especially in emotional stuff. So first, sometimes you need to give a little jolt to your nervous system, and it could be hot water, cold water. Put your hands in, take a shower, eat something sour, stomp your feet, pay attention to left and right. So you say out loud left and pound your left foot into the floor, right, left, right. Um, Anything that gives you a sensation to just come back from this dissociation from your body. I'm not one of those people who thinks all trauma is in your body. I don't really understand that metaphor for it. People, we have different ways. Like, to me, it's a lot of chatter. It's a lot of chatter. Everybody's different. But so my technique really comes at the chatter. But when we're about to lash out at somebody, emotional dysregulation is the kind other people are aware of. They're not aware what's happening in your hormones, and neither are you. But they can sure tell when you're being unreasonable, when your emotions are running high and your reasoning is not working very well, which is exactly what happens in the brain when somebody who has had trauma and gets dysregulated something has just set it off. So that's what I call a trigger. A trigger is a stimulus that causes you to get dysregulated. And so the emotions start running high, and it can be very attached to some old stuff from infancy or childhood that you don't even know is going on. Like, here it goes again. Everybody does this to me. Everybody's going to leave. Or my emotional flashback is, I have to do everything around here, don't I? And so we start to notice when it's happening. And as soon as you know that it's happening or that you're at risk of it happening, it's time to go slow. When you think, I have to make them understand me right now, how wrong what they said was, it's a clue to actually not say anything right now. And the second thing is, when you're in a relationship, it's very easy to make the other person feel criticized, blamed, abandoned, and that's not good for relationships. And so, as much as you can, it's good to protect other people from that while you figure out what's going on and what really needs to be said. Telling yourself, if this person really does need criticism from me, I can do that tomorrow or an hour from now. But right now, I'm going to totally attend to myself, get clear what's going on, name and release, what the distress thoughts are, and see what's really left behind. What's here? What's really true here? And so, I'm married, and my husband has watched me evolve, through being able to deal with this. He's seen me get very dysregulated, and he now has my permission to say, it feels like you're getting really dysregulated. You know, should we pause this conversation for a few minutes? And I'm finally to the point where that doesn't make me angry. I'm like, okay, okay. Like, it's always a good idea to accept that. And I trust him. He doesn't misuse it. He just, like, he can often see it before I can. And then I can say, I'm just feeling overwhelmed by all the questions you're asking. Like, that's one of my triggers. I can get dysregulated and that's, he just is that way. He'll be like, but what about this? But what about that? But did you think of this? And, blah, blah, and I'll just be like, whoa, whoa, it's 7 a.m. What are you doing to me? It feels overwhelming. So I can say, I have that overwhelmed feeling. Can I take 15 minutes and just get my head together? And then I'll have this conversation with you. And he's to the point where he goes, yeah. And when you can say, I'm going to talk to you, but I need a break right now, it's good to throw in, this conversation's important to me. I do want to have this conversation. I'm just having difficulty right now with myself. I'll get it together. I'll come back. That is the magic key to not hurting your relationship and still taking care of yourself. But you got to remember, the other person ends up feeling attacked and abandoned by dysregulated behavior. A lot of how I would act, like when I was more unhealed with it, would be like, you always do this. You don't even care about me. You wouldn't even be sad if I left, and then go pack my suitcase. That's terrible emotionally abusive behavior. And a person doesn't even know how they got into it with you. And so that's what I've learned, is sometimes I still get emotionally dysregulated, but I know it and I stop. And I also suggest, don't drive a car, don't make big decisions, don't sign anything permanent. Just get re-regulated and revisit this. Most things can wait an hour or a day until you're in a better frame of mind to be able to really, like, think about it in a neutral way.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you like went in such in depth, like about your best practices for regulating your emotions, and especially the fact that you like brought up self-awareness and being aware of when you know like you're not at the right time to have a conversation. I think people, when they go into a conversation at the wrong time, it's a huge mistake. And obviously, we're covering some things you can do in the moment, but I think one of the things you can also do is just not do certain things. What's on your list of like don't do's when you're feeling emotionally charged? I'm on camera a lot, and that's why one of my main priorities is keeping this jawline looking fresh. That's why I'm a big fan of today's sponsor, Vitali Skincare. I've been using their Skin Awakening moisturizer for some time now, and I can already notice a difference in my skin health. I recently had Debbie and Terry Barber on the show, who are the founders of Vitali. They talked about all things longevity, skincare, wellness, what they're doing to slow down the aging process for themselves, and why Vitali is so much different than other brands, and why they're so passionate about skincare. Vitali uses copper peptides that act as a signaling peptide that can tell stem cells to produce collagen, resulting in a more youthful appearance. And the good news is Vitali skincare can be effective on any skin type. And even better news is that they're offering a 20% discount for my audience. If you go to vitaliskincare.com and use the word Doug at checkout, you get 20% off your order. Again, vitaliskincare.com. Use the code Doug to get 20% off your order. Now back to the show.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we mentioned don't drive, don't use heavy equipment. Seriously, because you're actually in a state of dissociation. And I've in that dysregulated, dissociated state when I was very traumatized, I've twice driven off from gas stations with the pump in my car. I rear-ended a truck that luckily had a stainless steel bumper and I only damaged my own car, but I was like really upset about something. So first of all, physical safety in that sense, and then physical safety because if you're in a situation where there actually is danger, you know, whether it's a partner or road rage person, like it never turns out well if you try to argue with a road rage person, right? And it's better to just use your your ninja aikido, just don't fight, just keep yourself safe and get out of it. So you almost have to treat yourself like you're the road rage person and the person who could get hurt by it, and other people too. Don't hurt your relationships. Take your time, and then don't make threats. And this is very common for people who are traumatized and how they act in relationships while dysregulated is making threats. And it's often a passive aggressive threat that when we're dysregulated, we think, how is what I said mean? I was just saying that I had really good relationships before I met you. Like I wasn't really, we can be very, very unreasonable like that. And so when something needs to be said that risks hurting another person or is maybe a threat to the relationship, it needs to be said in great sobriety. And I don't just mean like substance sobriety, but emotional sobriety. It has been considered. It's not in the heat of the moment. So you never talk about like divorce or breakups when you're in the middle of it. You get to safety in the middle of it if you have to. But let's say you're in danger. Somebody's raging at you and you want to get to safety. You don't want to be fighting with them. You use your words carefully to say, I'm going to take a break right now. We're going to talk again later. And, I can see how hard this is for you. I don't want this to be hard for you. I'll talk to you later. That's like the safest thing you can do, but it gives you a chance to get your head together and think about it. A lot of us who had trauma as kids, we don't even see it coming. We end up back with people who don't treat us right, whether it's overt abuse or, I've just been making some videos and stuff about just having like a boss who created a workplace where it was very cliquish, and I wish I hadn't stayed as long as I had, but things like that. I wouldn't call that abuse exactly, but there's a way that I get shut down. My perception gets shut down if people are just sort of repeatedly making me scared I'm going to lose my job. And then I start feeling desperate, just like I might in a sick relationship or something. Some of us who have abandonment wounds will hold on tighter when threatened. So threatening people is a way that we trigger our own nervous system. And that's the weird thing about abandonment wounds is like they boomerang on you. So you can threaten somebody else. It's like, if you don't agree to this, I'm going to leave you. And we don't really mean it. But when we do that, we also trigger our own abandonment. And then this like like now I'm going to have to leave. It's just like this whole like mental cascade of old wounds that are not really fitting to the present moment. They're just generating a lot of fear and anger. And it is, if we were lucid in the moment, I would say it's very manipulative to try to scare somebody into agreeing something with you. Like if you don't like take this trip with my family, I'm going to divorce you. Something like that, where nobody has a choice. So doing something like that it's a form of dysregulation that breaks that connection, and it's manipulative. And I think that a lot of the literature or help that we get for that kind of behavior, it's often so quick to look at, well, look what your mom did, or look what your partner said. Of course you felt bad. But the part where life really changes is when you go, wow, I'm manipulating. I'm trying to scare somebody into doing what I want. And now they're closing their heart to me. And now I feel unloved. And here we are. And that for me is a lot of, I guess that's what emotional maturity is. But in many ways, those of us who had trauma in the past, we have a little delay on that, and we have to teach ourselves. And it's pretty advanced stuff sometimes to be able to admit, like, I'm manipulative, I'm trying to make somebody be the way I want. I think that's what codependence is, where you're trying to make somebody be. This is, I sort of joke about this, but long ago I used to get into relationships too fast, and I wouldn't really think about whether it was a suitable relationship until after I was already in and I was all bonded with them. And I'd be like, I don't even like this guy. Like, what am I doing? I don't respect him. I don't fit with him. I hate his friends. He's not funny. I don't like him, but it's like, I can't leave now because of my abandonment stuff. So I would like try to retrofit him through control, really just like, can't you just dress nicer? If you would just talk to me in this way, it would go so much better. Just always trying to make him change so that I would feel comfortable in the relationship, rather than doing this thing called dating, where you get to know somebody and kind of see, like, how does this sit with me? Is this a good fit? Do I like who this person is, all just naturally who they are, without having to change them? And so, we would joke about that in the 12-step program for families of alcoholics I used to go to, about like, I fall in love with their potential. Oh, but they have so much potential. And it's a manipulative thing to do. It's hurtful. It's not just sad for us. It's like, it's really a drag to be on the receiving end of it.
Yeah. And I think one of the main reasons, or a reason I should say, that people try to like manipulate other people, or they try to like find a way to, or when they express themselves in an unhealthy way, is because they're alone. They feel lonely. And we talked at the beginning about feeling left out in groups, and I think that happens a lot now, where people are feeling just left out in general from groups they want to be part of. Like, what's the hack there for people to find groups where they feel like they belong, and then how can they navigate ones where they feel left out?
Well, I've just written a whole book about it, and it's not really like anything I've ever found out there. I had to write it, but it's the stuff that I've had to hack to be able to be somebody who fits in, who, because I never felt like I did. And it wasn't one thing, but it was first learning to regulate my nervous system, first recognizing that the neglect I went through as a baby probably affected the development of my nervous system and my neurons, and those mirror neurons where you have empathy for other people. Happily, the capacity for connection has come, but I've had to work on it. It started when I was a kid. I would watch TV to try to learn, how do you act at a party, or how do you I growing up with hippies in a commune, I didn't know how to use silverware. I had to learn how to use a fork and a knife together when I was 12, and I watched people. I started to care how you fit in with people. And I think I was other parents thought I was a polite and kind kid, but a lot of times, if nobody's taking care of you, you have to be polite and kind to survive. And then later as an adult, you work on like, what's really going on here, and that nice aspect of you. I just talked on my channel with the No More Mr. Nice Guy author, Robert Glover, about that development of the nice persona that's manipulative, really, to just get people to like you and keep you safe, and so you don't get abandoned. But it doesn't work. It's not your authentic self. Nobody loves fake versions of us. And so we don't really get to experience love and connection when we're putting this artificial self out there. But we've been forced to at first. And then there's a lot of stuff that has to be unpacked. Like, You're going to have to learn to have boundaries if you're going to be close to people. Because if you don't have boundaries, you just end up in a pickle all the time and you hate them and you push them away. And you don't know how you did it, how you got there. So then you never want to go do social things because, like, what if it happens again? So you have to learn boundaries. You have to become self aware that you're letting these troubled people into your life. And honestly, I think when we're troubled, we like troubled people because they're a little safer for us. It doesn't evoke shame, like it does to hang out with people who have their lives together. So the first order of business is to get our own lives together and start doing that. And then we have to learn how to, the trouble with trauma is by necessity, it makes us very self centered. We're always taking the temperature. How do I feel? How do I feel about this? What am I going to do? What am I going to eat? What did they just say to me? And it makes us insensitive to other people. And being codependent or something or obsessively focused and trying to fix other people is no substitute for actually being attuned to other people and being able to sit there and honestly listen to them when they're telling you what's going on with them today. And it's actually quite precious. And I notice that fewer and fewer people can do that as opposed to, I don't know, 25 years ago in my life. People are very distracted and looking at their phones while talking. And I do it too. I'm not on a high horse about it, but it's just like, yeah, we have these things. And they're very seductive, and it feels very real, like that we have to be in touch with everything that's going on there, and we're missing the sort of extended presence with people. And so very happily in my life, like that's come to me finally. I studied in other people who made me feel like really seen, like what did they do that was so good about that, and I gave that a lot of thought. I did a lot of reading about it. And I also learned from some of the old philosophers and religious texts that it's like people have known for thousands of years that to be self-centered and always thinking about how do I feel, how does this affect me, it's going to weaken you in the long run. And that being strong inside permits you strong and in touch with yourself and able to set boundaries and make good decisions for yourself inside, which is easier said than done. But when you can do that, you can really turn your attention outward and be present to other people and be what I call a pillar, somebody who kind of holds things up so that when everybody else is struggling, there's a structure there, or a light, which is a person who gives encouragement to other people when they're down. And what I see is it's just too many, there's too high a proportion of us who are just like feeling bad and complaining. And I'm a YouTuber, so I look at my YouTube comments every day, and it's funny, there are like waves where all the comments come in. It happens at night, and people come in and they're like, life is terrible, people don't care, nobody cares, I'm always going to be alone. And then other days a wave comes through and it's just kind of like it's contagious, and people are like, I'm going to work on this, I can kind of see how I've done this, and I know what to do, and I'm excited to give it a try. And it's like this other way of thinking. So I think it's important to be around people who are working on it. It's not like, by spiritual bypassing fake optimism, but like a realistic sense of optimism that if I'm aware of this and I work on it, I can make a difference, and I help my friends do it, and then to actually show up and help other people do it. It's the most meaningful thing.
You brought up something interesting in that people who I guess don't have their stuff together completely chase after emotionally unavailable people because it reduces the shame. Like, talk more about that. I found that very interesting.
I just had to figure that out for myself. I'm like, why do I keep doing this? And or why don't I feel attracted to people? Back when I was, single, I would be like, sometimes like really nice men would be interested in me. And I would just think, well, I don't know. Ew. And I just had this weird, I can hardly explain it. I could never define why I didn't like them, and why somebody who was like, you know, I don't know. There's this one guy, the first time I met him, he was like riding a motorcycle backward off a ramp out of a truck with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. And I was like, yeah, him.
You're like marriage material.
Off to the races. I mean, I had to really look at that. That ended up being a very sad disaster in my life, the whole thing. And I was like, why? Why did I do that? And it's not very cognitively clear why. There was some deep, I think a lot of who we fall in love with and who we feel attracted to is coded in infancy. And there's, you know, There's a maybe, I don't know. It's just a hypothesis, but I had to be. My mom used to come and go when I was a baby. She'd like meet some guy and split for a month, and then nobody knew if she was coming back, and she'd come back, and my dad would be panicking, and they'd fight about it, and my grandparents would come, and then he hired somebody to come after school, and he patched it together somehow. But I think I just always had this like chronic, like, I'm going to get left. And I remember when I was like 10, I was like, I want to join the Girl Scouts, but I better come home after school or my mom might leave. That was kind of this like low level anxiety. I wouldn't want to participate in after school things. And so by the time I was 10, I was conscious, but where did that come from? I think it came when I was a baby. And I think our attraction and falling in love thing, it's very hard to control. We have very little control over it. But I'm living evidence like it does change when you heal a lot of the other stuff. But that was one of the hardest things for me to heal in myself. Some stuff was easy, like learning to be honest and straightforward and thoughtful and considerate came a lot easier than like not falling in love with trouble.
You've talked about this term limerence, that I didn't know what it was, and I started watching some of your content, and I was like, "Oh, this makes a lot of sense." Like, talk about it and why people should understand it, and what can they do if they feel like they fall into this category.
Yeah, limerence, it's this psychologist Dorothy Tenov made up the word in the 70s, and she meant it to be like when you're Twitter pated, when you're first falling in love and you're just kind of la la about it. But it sort of evolved in the culture to mean when it turns sick, where you can't stop obsessing on somebody even though you know it they're not interested or not available. I mean, some people have it for people who they once knew but that person is dead, and some people have it for a movie star or a fictional character. Like it can go that far. Yeah, and which is helpful to know. Like sometimes it's like an ex or somebody you see at work or something. They're in your life, but you cannot let go of this idea that if they would just like return your feelings, everything would be great. You'd be happy. And there's this huge like cognitive disconnect there. It's like, but they don't like you that way. So it would not make everything good. It already has made everything not good. So it's not an option, but there's this like glitch going on. My theory is, and there's not a lot of people who talk about this. And I'm not a therapist or a psychologist. I'm somebody I've experienced it, and I've helped a lot of people with it. And I've been able to see the correlations that people have in what happened in their past. And it seems like limerence is most likely to happen to people. In my observation, people send me letters, hundreds of letters asking for my advice, and I answer some of them on YouTube. But I read them all. And when people say, I just can't get over this person, almost always there was an extremely neglectful parent. Either they died, they were missing, or most often they were drunk. And the thing about drunk people is it's like their love switches on, it switches off, it switches on, and then they're like, I love you, baby. And then they're not here for 3 days. And so there's like, we get primed to see love where there is no love, or to believe in something magic about this like painful state. And I remember because my parents fought a lot, they got divorced. My mom would run away without us or sometimes with us, and she'd say, You're never going to see your dad again. And I remember being a little kid and like trying to fall asleep next to the window and just looking out at the moon and going, Moon, can you bring my daddy back? I just want my daddy back. I want my parents to be happy. And I'm like, that's when it started. And then as a kid, I just really I liked to imagine that I had a horse. I was very imaginative. Imagination is good, but I think that my imaginative nature, coupled with all that neglect and threats to our safety, kind of combined into a wound that made it really hard for me to see what's real. And so that's the thing about limerence healing is it's almost impossible to get through to somebody who's in the middle of it. They're like, yeah, but it's really like the best relationship I've ever had. It's like, and yet they're married to somebody else having that relationship. So I wouldn't call that a good relationship with you. Like that would not be what you're characterizing it. You cannot get through. There's just like a leap right there. So when somebody wants to get over limerence, they well, because they'll try everything. They want to talk about it all the time. They'll go, I'm limerent. Yeah, I know it's really sick. Let me tell you about him. He's so amazing. And that's like, it's it's an addiction to hope, I would say. Hope is the dope. I always, that's what I call it. It's an addiction to hope. You just think maybe if I said just the right thing in a coded way that wouldn't get me rejected. Because if you come right out and say, look, I love you, I've always loved you, I'm waiting to find out if you feel the same way, they'd go, no. And you know that. So you're going off into this hyper reality where you want to drop hints, you want to check their social media, and then you start to believe that they're maybe saying things coded to you in their social media. That's a common sign. And then it goes to the next level, and people are going to like psychics and, kind of new age belief systems. It could be done in religion too, where you go, well, we're made from the same soul. There's a whole like cult of people who are into this twin soul idea. I had some guy like lay that on me once and I was horrified. He's like, I think we're the same soul. And I'm like, get out of here. You know, when you're not in it, it's like, it sounds crazy, but he was like, his whole life was miserable. And he was like rationalizing, that's why I can't get over her. I mean, I really didn't know him that well. And that's limerence. Being on the receiving end, it's not pleasant either. But being the one who's limerent on somebody else, it'll like drain the life out of you, and it'll make it impossible for you to have a real relationship because you're absolutely in love with this like ghost in your mind, and it's not even who the person is. It's not the person.
That's wild. Yeah, I never heard it. Have heard it like described like that, but it totally makes sense. Um, I think that people feel ashamed, especially when they're in their like 30s and 40s, I would say, because they feel a bit behind in life and lost. And they're convinced that everyone else in their life has their stuff together and they don't. And so they feel like detached and disconnected, and that they can't like get ahead. Um, I know you've come across a lot of people. Like, what percentage of them in your, I mean, I know you're not a therapist, but in your analysis, would you say actually have their stuff together?
I guess you have to define what it is to be a functional person. I'd have to, I mean, just off the cuff, I'd say somebody who's functional is honest about who they are. They are devoting their energy to the people who have a right to their energy and their love, being like spouse, kids, dependents. That's a horrible thing that happens in, trauma families is the the love and attention that rightfully belongs to the children is not given to the children. So functional means your energy goes to the right place. Uh, you you never intentionally harm people, and when you have harmed people, you're able to be aware of it and apologize and set it right. That's your basic thing. And then to be able to make a living and support your dependents, that's one. I think that's underrated in trauma. A lot of people with trauma are under earning or struggling with money and work, and it's really held them back, and their gifts and talents can't come to the surface and be used. It's financially devastating, and being poor means you end up staying in bad relationships, and it's just, it feeds on itself. So a functional person has that together. And what is the percentage? I don't know. I guess the older I get, the more I think, well, some people have all that external, that material thing together, but they are full of hate. They're just constantly posting hateful things online. And the older I get, the more I realize like everybody has, they have a good side and they have a bad side. And the object of the game is to develop your good side and to try to mitigate your bad side. Like there's no way around having a dark side. There's just no way. We're all like prone to the same thing, banging on our horns because the old lady is crossing the street so slowly, you know. Like who hasn't been that person in some form, right? So I don't know what the percentage is. I'd say everybody has it to some degree. But the thing that I think holds people back, keeps people stuck in the category, is when they don't believe that healing is possible. The whole thing that separates the wheat from the chaff here is when you go, there is a way forward, and if I get the focus on myself and heal the things I can change and do the best I can using things available to me, and in the age of the internet and free 12-step groups and books and things, there's a way. There's a lot you can learn about doing this, but everything depends on being able to focus on making yourself the best person you can be. When you're a better person, you'll stop taking so much crap from other people. So yeah, it's their fault sometimes, but I see this in the YouTube. You produce content too, but sometimes if I make a video about how you can get your financial thing together, there will be a certain bunch of comments from people going, you don't understand, Anna. It's a capitalist system and it's rigged against us. And it's like, I grew up on welfare, and I had to like figure out how to work my way through college, and it took years. And I do understand about things. I know things. I didn't have health insurance for a long time. I didn't have hot water for a long time. I understand about poor, and I also have had experience about stuff that I can change that's made things better. I still haven't become a billionaire or queen of the world. So, but I was just talking with my son last night. I found on Ancestry, a distant cousin had posted a letter from my great grandmother, and she died in 1935. And on the day she died, she was waiting for surgery, and she wrote a letter to her daughter and said, I just want to tell you that I feel like I didn't do enough for you. She was an immigrant and she cleaned houses all her life. Her husband died when the kids were little. I knew that about her. And she goes, Bertha, I'm really sorry that I couldn't do more for you. I was always at other people's houses and not with you. And I worry that that hurt you. And I just want you to know I love you so very much. And if I make it through this surgery, I'll be happy to enjoy a few more years of life. And if I don't worry, because I'm ready to meet my God. So think of me and share my love with the kids and the grandchildren, and just know that I love you all. And I showed it to my son, who's 22 years old, and I'm like, she means us too. She never met us, but she means us too. And we both of us just sat there kind of feeling the love of this distant ancestor, who died decades before I was born. And the trauma that she lived through and the love that ended up coming through. And I just considered her a very healed person for that. She, to be able to do that, to share the love with the family and go out peacefully and not leave harm and let everybody know that, I just thought that was a very successful life, as hard as it was for her.
Hmm. If you were to like run into somebody at the store or run into somebody at a coffee shop and they said, Anna, like just give me some steps. I know you can't fix me, but give me some steps to focus on to get my life together. Like what would you tell them to do?
I'd say take your focus off of other people and the past, and sit down with a piece of paper and start naming what it is right now that you're doing that's making things harder for you that you wish you could change, and start there. Yeah. The other people in the past are very difficult to change. In fact, you can't change the past or other people. And while it's helpful to know that stuff, I think it's way overrated in our culture, as like just knowing it and talking about it is going to change everything. And that's what I see. A lot of people are walking around very, very focused on the capitalism or whatever it is for them, mom, that category of people, this political party, and it's not going to get you anywhere. And if you want to have influence and make it a better world, you have to get your shit together.
Yeah, and you have to take the attention off of other people and put it on yourselves. Like I swear that, if people just took 30-40% of the time they spend focusing on other people and invested it in themselves, like they would be so much further along. What are some of the other like habits you would recommend for someone if they're really trying to like get their life together and feel better about who they are as a person?
Well, the one thing that really helped me was this daily practice thing of it just, like a lot of tools that other people use successfully, they couldn't touch me because I had so much going on, so much noise in my head of emotions and thoughts that were unprocessed. So I needed a way for those to move out. And I know some people do it through somatic stuff or yoga, but that was never enough for me, or breathing. And people would always go, "Hey, you got to breathe." And I'd be like, "I'm breathing. If I weren't breathing, I'd be dead." You know, that's not the problem. It's the bag of cats up here. And so it's the writing exercise, and it's different than journaling. Journaling is a good thing, but that's more about like chronicling, remembering, organizing your thoughts. This is a dump. You're just getting the distressed thoughts out, asking for them to be removed, and resting for a while in a structured way. And yeah, if anybody who wants to learn it, it's a free course. I'll give you the link. You can take it. It takes about an hour to learn it and try it. And then I teach it in depth in my books, how to do it, the daily practice. But I don't know. We've got hundreds of thousands of people using it successfully now. And yeah, I used to just teach people one on one, and then YouTube happened, and I got on YouTube, and just a lot of people. It I don't think it's like the perfect technique for everyone, but for a lot of people, and a lot of people who use it are also on the spectrum, stuff where just distress thoughts pile up and you need a place to park them. You just need to park them. You don't have to solve them or understand them or know how you got them or anything like that. You move them out. So I encourage people, if you want to try it, don't just wing it from what I said, because it can make you feel worse if you don't follow the sort of technique in a way that turns it into something that makes you feel better. So I teach that for free for anybody who wants to come, with free Zoom calls for any student who wants to come to my Zoom calls every 2 weeks too.
Anna, thank you so much for your time today. I loved our conversation. I think my audience is going to get a tremendous amount of value out of this.
Yay, great. Nice to meet you, Doug.
That was fantastic.